Illinois lawmakers take it easy in their first week of veto session, but some big votes could be coming up soon. That's next on CapitolView. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of CapitolView. I'm your host, Jamey Dunn with Illinois Issues Magazine, and here tonight to talk to me about Illinois politics and government is Kevin McDermott, Statehouse Bureau Chief with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Ben Yount, Statehouse reporter with Illinois Statehouse News, and Dave Dahl, Statehouse reporter with Illinois Radio Network. So veto session, not a lot happened this week. One of the big issues up was major gaming expansion. It was discussed in committee, it didn't pass out. Ben, what do you think is going on with this? I mean, no action was taken. Is there just too much in this bill?
When my kids were little, one of their favorite books was Don't Give a Mouse a Cookie. And I think you can sum up this week with Don't Give Lawmakers Extra Time. 7 days of lame duck session in January took a pin to the balloon of this veto session. Why take any hard votes now when you can wait till the absolute last possible moment and stick some people who are on their way out the door with those votes? I think that just permeated everything. All of these proposals are pretty big and sweeping. Gaming, pension borrowing, municipal pension reform. They are certainly not uncomplicated, and those things take a while to come together. Add that to the fact that these guys come back the week after Thanksgiving, and then they come back right before the new General Assembly is sworn in, and it's just a recipe for nobody doing a whole lot.
It's not a lot of urgency, that's for sure, Ben. And with no new governor coming in, it's not as if there's an impetus to quick get something done before you change governors, because we're not.
Well, and it seems with this gaming bill up, everybody's taking the opportunity to jump on board. You know, the racetracks want slots. New cities keep jumping on, we want a casino, and we want a casino, and with the push for jobs, it's very easy for them to jump on, but it may just bog the bill down in the end. But speaking of gaming revenues are down in Illinois, and the House took some steps to maybe do something about
that?
Well,
there's discussion about doing something about that. It has to do with the state's smoking ban, which went into effect 2 years ago, and the folks who were against that at the time, one of their arguments was that the casinos would be hurt because casinos across the border in other states are allowed to smoke, and so the gamblers in our casinos will go there instead. These folks are back using what's, to me, has sort of become a theme of, I think we're going to see as a theme in the coming session, which is we have a budget crisis, therefore do my issue. And in this case, what they're saying is if you allow smoking once again in the casinos, revenues will go up, and they're claiming they've lost something like $500 million in the last 2 years. There's a little debate as to whether that really can be tied directly to the smoking ban, but that's what they're claiming. And I think, they may, if this happens, I think you're going to see others coming in and making the same claim. You're going to see bar owners in restaurants in border areas saying, hey, the same logic can apply to us, because people will go across the border into St. Louis instead of, coming to our bar here in Belleville. And
the two things you guys are talking about go together. The industry is hurting, and someone wants to build 5 more of these? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's that's a good point, Dave.
Well, logic has nothing to do with the gambling proposal. It means that people can go and get theirs. I feel bad for the folks in East Peoria and the folks in Aurora. I don't know if Joliet would be included in that proposal.
It's a strangely written proposal, too. It only applies to those who are in direct competition with another state where smoking is allowed, and the bill has a built-in self-destruct mechanism that says if the other state bans smoking, then you have to stop as well. And I think they're throwing a bone to the anti-smoking.
So would that just be Missouri?
No, you have one up in Rock Island,
okay.
And in
Metropolis.
Chicago. Metropolis is down near Kentucky, right?
Kentucky, and then of course the border casinos up there by the Indiana border, and theoretically, I believe Chicago. Wisconsin does have some. And you also have to look at this smoking ban legislation with an eye towards where else do they want to build. Danville, Rockford, Chicago. I was talking with Kathy Dre with the American Lung Association, who was the flag bearer for the Smoke-Free Illinois, and pretty standard stuff, but she is really disturbed that this law has only been in effect a year or two, and you're starting to see it rolled back. And once something starts to roll, it's a very fast hill to get it down.
Well, how do you tell the bar owners they can't do the same thing if they do this for the casinos? That's what I want to know.
The point she made was now all of a sudden a waitress in a bar, her life is more important than a worker in a casino. Right. Those folks can get poisoned in the name of state revenue, but not someone.
Well, state revenue is the point. I mean, I think this is the effects of a $13 billion deficit. There's this crisis mode that some people are going to take advantage
Everything's back on the table again.
The foundation of the Smoke-Free Illinois has been a workplace safety issue.
Right.
And you talk about, well, is a casino worker's health less important? We asked Dan Burke about that just Thursday, the sponsor of this latest exemption, and he said that what they want to eventually talk about is having a smoke-free area in a casino. Well, I lived in a community that had its own casino, and the smoke-free area in that was not very well populated. And if you go to a smoke-free section of a restaurant, really, if you've got a smoking section, the whole place is the smoking section.
Yeah, if anybody's, we were traveling through Missouri and stopped and ate in Rolla, a Waffle House, and the first time that I'd eaten in a restaurant where you had smokers over there and us over here, and the eggs tasted a little Marlboro-y, but...
Well, I've never understood the math of this whole argument. I mean, smokers make up 20% of the population. Why these businesses go to the mat over 20% of their business? Although, I mean, maybe they've got statistics showing that non-smokers will put up with it, whereas smokers won't. I don't know.
Yeah. I think there are studies that determine that your casino customer and your smoker a lot of times are the same people.
Well, the study that came out that the pro-smoking people were using in this debate pegged it at something like 40%, which is double the population in general, but it's still a minority.
Yeah, more people who gamble smoke than who smoke in the general population. But it's I think you hit it right on the head. All the casinos are down. Right. They want more money, and they're holding out this enticement of state lawmakers of, hey, we can get you more money, we'll get some money too, and that's not but just sort of shiny nickel, hit it for you.
You guys seek out the Waffle House? Is that a deliberate choice?
All right, speaking of economic development.
There's a lot of those in Missouri.
Ben, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about the Wrigley Field plan that has come out over the last week. Speaker Madigan kind of nixed it, and then he opened up a window for it to maybe happen. Can you tell me a little bit about it? It's a plan to revamp Wrigley Field.
The Ricketts family, who bought the Cubs, are kicking around this proposal, and there's so much talk about what it is and what it is not, but there really hasn't been anything happening at the Statehouse. And this is common with these big proposals, that there are rumors, there are half-written ideas, and when they run that up the flagpole, depending on which way the wind blows, that's where it goes. This would not use any direct state money, but would get, I think the best way to explain it is state permission to use enhanced revenue that would usually go to the city of Chicago through higher ticket sales and an extra levy on the tickets. Basically, it would cost more to go to a Cubs game to pay for the renovation. It's $200 million. There was a beautiful drawing in one of the Chicago papers that showed this sort of shopping alley outdoor center that you could walk through and
it's a thing like the Red Sox have, like
this
bizarre.
Disneyland
yeah,
of the Cubs.
Cubs land. We haven't won in years. Come celebrate. But it's the problem is not the actual meat and potatoes of the proposal. It's the optics of the thing. Not only is the state broken, this is not the time to come to Springfield and ask for something, but the patriarch of the Ricketts family is online almost everywhere you turn, saying government spending is bad, earmarks are evil, Dick Durbin is a hooligan, and you can talk out of one side of your mouth, but it just doesn't look good. And I don't think there are enough Cub fans in positions of power in Springfield that really have a vested interest.
They just bought this thing, and now it needs $200 million worth of work that is not going to be reflected on the field. That's an issue. On the other hand, if you're talking about, for example, hotel tax, those are very popular because those soak out-of-towners.
Well, Wrigley Field is a huge tourism beacon. I mean, people come to the city of Chicago to see a Cubs game. And it is, I think I want to say it was the third most visited spot in the state of Illinois.
And
So
the surrounding neighborhood as well is huge.
There is the state has a vested interest in making sure that is still there. Or they wouldn't want to bulldoze it. But it just doesn't look right. And if you don't handle these type of optics issues, it really just falls apart very quickly. And add that to all of the other mix, just lawmakers not wanting to do very much, that proposal fell apart very
And they're
quickly.
already on the hook for Sox Park and Soldier Field, and maybe they should or shouldn't get ahead of Wrigley Field in the bonds and all that.
Well, it is veto session, and the House took up a few vetoes without really discussing them at all. They overrode a couple of Governor Quinn's vetoes. Dave, could you talk a little bit about that? One of them related to the new FOIA
I think the most
regulations.
significant veto override of the first 3 days of the session anyway was the FOIA. The state government had a sweeping change in FOIA, which the good government and the journalism types say is a good thing. A lot of improvements in the Freedom of Information Act, which we call FOIA. And as soon as it got put into effect, people were starting to file, not unlike Smoke-Free Illinois, ways to unravel it. And this was tied in, they say it was tied in with the Race to the Top legislation, where your personnel file should be exempted from FOIA. If someone wants to get into your state employee personnel file, your teacher's personnel file, performance review, And so the House has successfully overridden the governor's veto on that. The governor said, no, I'm for open government, and these performance reviews should be subject to the open meetings, the Freedom of Information Act.
He had an exception in there, didn't he, for law enforcement, for
He
safety
did.
or security
He did,
purposes?
but municipal employees in other ways, teachers in other ways. And it's one of those where you listen to both sides of the argument and you wonder if they're even talking about the same thing. But on the one hand, you could, if I am the supervisor and you're the employee, oh boy, all of the red ink that I marked down on yours, it might be something that I'm going to protect from being seen, and so I'll just put it in this exempted thing, and another way for it to be shielded. Or you could say that I'm not going to write down all the bad things about you because I don't want it to be seen, thus it won't get written down. Thus, if you're a bad teacher or something, people next year, the year after, are not going to find out. So, it awaits action in the Senate, this veto override.
Another thing that happened in the Senate this week was Senate President John Cullerton and Minority Leader Christine Radonio decided to start 2 bipartisan committees to look into Medicaid and workers' comp reform. This is something the Republicans have been saying they want to see happen before they put any votes on borrowing or a tax increase. Is this for real? Is this something that we're going to see open a new age of bipartisanship in the Senate, or is this just?
We had the election. The open age of bipartisanship ended on November 2nd. Medicaid reform was the mantra all the way through the election, and even stretching back into the last budget negotiations. Republicans believe that there are billions of dollars to be found or saved with Medicaid reform. Now, that reform either means being a lot tighter with how that money is spent, or more likely, some people are going to be ushered off of the program. The proposal that is on the table now, these bipartisan committees, were announced at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and then given a January 3rd deadline to have recommendations. Most committees couldn't even get a hearing scheduled between now and January 3rd, much less figure out proposals and solutions to Medicaid and workers' comp.
But are we expecting any new ideas? I mean, this has been around for so long. Are they probably just going to present things that have been on the table for a while?
And if you hold new meetings to hear the same old, you've already heard that before. That seems to be a theme that I think will be interesting as we get into January. Same leaders, same problems.
Is this perhaps a face-saving measure that everybody's agreed upon, so that when the tax hike vote does come up, you can say, well, yeah, but we had this commission and we're studying it and blah blah blah.
I'll be interested to see which gets more play, workman's comp or Medicaid. I've been reading a little bit that Cullerton may be a little bit more open. The president, Senate President, may be a little bit more open to workers' comp reform. Republicans hold on to that Medicaid reform as it is the key to the whole budget. So I want to know if one gets more play, if one gets downplayed, and this could very well just be all for show to give everybody cover when the vote comes. I want to know when the tax vote's going to come. I think it comes.
The longer he waits, the harder this gets. I mean, if it doesn't come in January, that would be an indication, I think, that the whole thing is falling apart.
We were talking with some lawmakers in the House who said, and they were blunt about it, they're looking to those 7 days in January as the days of action.
Well, it gets nothing but harder after that.
Not just for the veto session and the end of this General Assembly, but for the next spring.
Right.
That if it doesn't get done with those lame duck lawmakers, it may not get done at all.
That's going to make for a fun January through May.
Well, and then one of the other issues that they're looking for Republican votes on is the pension borrowing, and I would think that would be a little bit easier for them to get Republican votes on what's something like this that might just be a bit of a show or a bit of a concession.
Well, they can call that reform
Yeah.
at some level. As long as you can say it's reform, then you can vote for it. Yeah.
Everybody saw all the way that votes were portrayed during the election, and still fresh in people's mind. They want to make sure that either they can spin the vote to their advantage or that they can defend the spin. And pension borrowing and municipal pension reform, I have a feeling will get lumped together, not necessarily in the same legislation, but tied together when lawmakers look to vote. You're going to make a lot of mayors happy if you change the rules for new cops and firefighters.
Yeah, they were lobbying for that this week, and that's one that a lot of people are saying is pretty likely to go through. Ben, you had a story on that this week. The details are still a little hazy, though, right?
What the final agreement will be, well, I shouldn't say agreement, what the final legislation will be is still up in the air, but it appears State Rep Kevin McCarthy all but said, we're going to vote when we get back from Thanksgiving break, and there will be legislation, and it will likely pass, but there will likely not be an agreement. Police and fire unions have two separate bills that had already been under consideration that they would like. They all dance around the same issue, raising the retirement age, lowering some of the benefits, putting a cap. Firefighter unions say that their plan could save 50% over the lifetime, 10% immediately for new hires. McCarthy is looking to raise the retirement age by about 7 years and not fine, but put a penalty in for police officers and firefighters who retire at around age 50. Mayors, I don't know if a pothole got filled or a stop sign got placed across Illinois earlier this week. Just about every mayor that we served was in the Capitol. And Carbondale's Brad Cole, Rockford's Larry Morrissey, and Springfield's Tim Davlin all said, listen, they got to do this, and they got to do it now, or we're going to go broke. And the legislature did some of this to the state's pension systems last year, enough reform to generate savings, but
The reform that popped up in one day unannounced, you mean?
and it's still a very good pension. You know, anyone getting a job with the state after January 1st will still have a very nice retirement. And I imagine you'll see the same thing for cops and firefighters across the state.
The police and fire folks, though, say that unlike all the other employees, their jobs are physically debilitating, and a lot of times they don't get the full benefit anyway. They don't work until whatever age it is, 55 or what have you, or get the 30 years in as it is now, because it's such hard work.
I think some teachers might argue with them that their jobs are physically debilitating as well.
We're not running into the burning
But
building.
this is true. They aren't facing gunfire, we hope. Another group that was lobbying this week was a group that's hoping to repeal the death penalty in Illinois. Kevin, you wrote a little bit on that.
Yeah,
Can
this
you
is
tell us
back
about
to our theme of we're broke and here's a way to save money, and it's a novel argument and probably a pretty clever one from their standpoint. These are the folks who want the death penalty taken off the books in Illinois, and what they're essentially saying is, look, we've had a moratorium in place for 10 years. We're not executing anyone anyway. Death penalty cases, by their nature, cost a lot more than regular cases. There's a lot more safeguards involved. We have a special commission that has to review them. We spend at least $20 million a year on this. Why not just get rid of it? It's an interesting argument, and it probably is their best chance of getting it off the books, but I don't think it's going to work because this really isn't anybody's front burner issue, especially when you're not actually executing people. I think it occurs to me after writing this story that I worked on that this really is the best of both worlds for the political leaders. I mean, they can be in favor of executions, and they can be tough on crime, and they can talk about sending people to death row, and they don't have to put up with any of the controversy or risk of actually executing anyone. I would suspect that this moratorium that was supposed to be temporary when it was imposed 10 years ago is probably the permanent future of, death row in Illinois.
I think the abolition of the death penalty was one of these social or back burner issues that when it looked like Bill Brady was going to be governor, all of a sudden there was a lot more urgency because Brady had said during the campaign he supports the death penalty.
He said it, but this was interesting to me though, when you pressed him on that or pressed his people on that, even Bill Brady, who of all people would be the one to say, yes, start it up again, even he hesitated on that. He didn't come right out and say, we're going to do this.
You got another issue with Brady. Is this a big deal? This is a big deal to you? Dogs and cats are a big deal?
Yeah.
Gay marriage is a big deal?
Well, but when it looked like you may have a Republican legislature, a Republican governor, there were a lot of people who said, this is our last chance, and now that pressure has gone away.
Yeah.
It just adds to the theme of veto session.
Well, let's face it, nobody votes for or against a politician based on the death penalty. It's not like abortion or guns.
I think with Brady, and this might have been covered in previous shows, if you add up all of these little things, the Jason Plummer issue and the dog and cat issue, so the women, he didn't ask Jim Edgar to do a commercial for him. If you add up all these little things, I bet that would have been 20,000 votes.
Well, then speaking of the election, especially the governor having influence on what's going on in veto session, we haven't seen Quinn this week really at all. Last week, I guess he's in Springfield, but he hasn't been out publicly at all. Last week, he was talking about legislation all week, talking about the tax increase, talking about civil unions. Where is he? What does that say? And how does that compare to governors in past veto sessions?
Yeah, it's a little strange. I mean, he came out initially after the election, was talking about his mandate, which created a little bit of controversy because when you look at that soberly, it doesn't really look like a mandate. It looks like he squeaked back in. Yeah, you're right. He's been notably absent, and it means one of two things: either he's hiding, and things are not going well with some of his agenda already, or maybe he's quietly talking with the other leaders behind the scenes. The civil unions thing is another one. It's interesting to me that they're putting much capital behind this. It's really not front burner to most people. But
I think that will move. Again, I think that some of those issues you have to satisfy
it won't
voters
hurt
back home.
them,
It's not going to
yeah.
hurt the Democrats. I think the Democrats will move that through. I think you have to look back to last spring to see what happened when Pat Quinn came to the Capitol and was involved and testified in bills, only to turn around a week or day or whatever later and change his mind about him. Pat Quinn is still learning on the job, and it's been a very, very, very rough learning experience. He just got over one scare. I think that the common thought is his tax increase is dead. Why come out, play that card, have it shot down in November? Maybe you save it for January and say, well, you guys turned it down, so you come up with an idea. He has not done well being a presence in the Capitol during session, so
that's true.
It may be a strategy to just keep him away and do no harm first.
You can't listen yourself into trouble.
And there was a pretty strong indication that not a lot was going to happen this week. So if he came here and lobbied and nothing happened, it can make him look like he's not getting his agenda moved forward at all. So
he's going to have plenty of help in making his agenda look, ignored. I don't think he needs to take that onto himself.
All right. Well, Ben, we are talking about an interesting national issue that's come to Illinois. It has to do with alcoholic beverages with energy drink components to them. Can you tell us about this?
Yes. No, it
What
is.
are you talking about?
Illinois is not about to let the latest scare slide by.
Of course not.
The state wants to now ban these caffeine alcohol drinks. Four Loko, which according to the internets is called blackout in a can by the
The
College.
FDA is kind of making us think
FDA
about
weighed
it
in
too.
on this.
Yeah.
I believe it's the state of Washington or the state of Oregon has already banned it. The company Fusion with a PH Products, which is here in Illinois, has said, all right, we'll take the caffeine out of it. It is essentially a giant 24-ounce can of, from what I understand, and I haven't had one, maybe after the show, but I haven't had one yet. It packs the punch of a 40-ounce bottle of malt liquor and an energy drink. And so it's
So Ben's Friday night.
Yeah. my Friday morning. First of all, in addition to doing that with your heart, the alcohol slows it down, the caffeine speeds it up. It's been linked to a number of illnesses, a couple of deaths. Parents, some schools across the country are blaming it. And State Senator Ira Silverstein said, its time's come. We got to protect people. It's a combination of the fact that it is sold in the big cans. It's targeted to younger people. It is absolutely no different than a vodka and Red Bull mixing.
I was going to say, what is the difference?
One's in a big can. You can buy it for $1.79 at the corner store.
I think part of it's just the marketing, that it's become popular with college students who maybe don't know their limits.
We are on the cusp of the silly season where you will see lawmakers introduce bills to ban or endorse or do whatever to everyone.
Well, see, and this is what happens after the new General Assembly is in immediately. This is why I still think if Quinn's serious about this, he needs to get on the stick with the tax rate.
You've got lame duck, then you've got the inauguration. January and a good chunk of February will be lost to all of the silliness. And then you come back in March, we've got a spring break. If you look at this calendar with a critical eye, we're in April already. And if Pat Quinn doesn't have a plan B, he's going to get another budget of just, you go manage the mess.
Well, Dave, the speaker had some advice for Pat Quinn this week. We got about a minute left. Can you tell me a little bit about what Mike Madigan said Quinn needs to do headed forward?
Be like me.
Be like Mike, okay.
Each day, make today better than yesterday, make tomorrow better than today, and focus. Now I can't get that Gatorade song out of my head.
which is a little funny, but also things that people have been critical of Quinn throughout his first term,
lack of focus,
and not being able to build off of lessons that he's maybe learned in the past, or not being able to move things forward.
Amass the power and then use it.
Yeah, that's the real lesson. No, Pat Quinn will have to learn from last spring where he proposed this tax increase. It didn't work. He didn't have something to come back with. You very well may see history repeat itself 12 months later.
And we're going to have to leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Capitol View. I'd like to thank Kevin McDermott, Ben Yount, and Dave Dahl for joining me, and we'll see you next week.